Well, while we're waiting, how about if we start with some quick introductions? I am Marcia Bernstein, co-convener of the Foreign Policy Working Group at Large at CAPA, and am on the particular campaign that we're in right now of the defunding the Pentagon. We'll talk about the other ones that we have later. And I'll popcorn to Charles.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charles, he, him pronouns, and I work with Nonviolent Peace Force and also with Chicago Area Peace Action on some of the foreign policy working group campaigns like this one today. And happy to see everybody here today. And I will bounce it to Lauren.
Guys, I am Lauren, she, her pronouns. I am affiliated with Chicago Area Peace Action Paul, so I'm a student organizer. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. I'll also be assisting with that, so if there are any issues, I'm the go-to person. And I will popcorn it to Carol.
All right, well, I'm Carol, and I guess I'm affiliated with several groups, probably Network, FCNL, Citizens Climate Lobby. So in other words, I'm a person who gets a lot of information and contacts my Congress people, but right now I'm not really with any organization the way some of you are.
Okay, why don't we popcorn to Steve then?
Hi, I'm Steve Watrous. I live in Milwaukee. I work here with the United Nations Association chapter, also with our End the Wars Coalition, and with the FCNL advocacy teams, among other things.
Welcome, Steve. And who are you going to popcorn to?
Sam.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I like this popcorn term. I've never heard this one before. I'm going to start using that. I'm not really affiliated with any organization specifically, but just here to learn and interested in defund the Pentagon and just sort of how we might put that into action. And I see, is there anyone left to popcorn to?
Marna.
Marna.
Yeah. Hi. I can't turn on my camera today, but happy to be here. I'm with Nonviolent Peace Force, and Charles has been really integral to our work and getting us involved at this summit. So really happy to be here and am listening.
Great. Okay, cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Charles is going to share his screen because we have a little presentation, so to speak. So if we can have Charles, Lauren, can you let Charles screen share?
Yes, you should be able to now.
Okay, cool. All right.
Thank you, Lauren.
There we go. Excellent, thank you. Charles and I, Marcia Bernstein and Charles Johnson, are going to be doing the presentation this afternoon. And we've all done our little highs. And so if we can go to slide 2, Charles.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And so we're hoping that those of us here maybe already know something about the topic or not as much. So whatever range of experience you have, we just wanted to place some info on the table and then hear ideas from all of us. So here we look at the discretionary budget This is something that comes out every year. And so we are looking at how typically the US federal discretionary budget comes out. And we see in this example, which is very similar to other years, this example is from fiscal year 2019, but it's indicative. And we see the pie chart, which has many different things which our tax dollars go to. And as you may know, that big blue section keeps growing every year. That is the amount we're spending on military. What we wanted to start with was just a couple questions to this group to say, how would you like to see this adjusted? If you think any of the pie pieces could change size, what areas of need are perhaps being neglected in this pie? And so if anyone would like to unmute, and maybe there's just a certain sliver of the pie that speaks to you.
Well, this is Steve in Milwaukee. I go for just about every slice on the left side, getting bigger. Things could be done better in all those regards. I'm not saying it would be spent wisely, but doing things with renewable energy, doing better with international affairs and helping repair the world, mass transit, all those kind of things would benefit from increasing funds. And it's there, it's over on the right side. Just need to diminish that military budget.
Yeah, this is Carol. I would pick out energy and environment. I think I've heard that the military even has said that global warming is going to influence our national security. So if we're only doing a little slice on the environment, we're not even helping our military situation.
Yeah, thank you both for the great feedback. Anyone else would like to share?
This is Sam. I would just, I would like to see military, you know, sort of redefined as defense and what we think of as defense. I think a lot of these areas on the left have a connection to what we may consider defense. Maybe in a traditional sense, defense is thought of as military, but I think particularly with environment, housing, food, there are many connections to different crises in the US and around the world in these pieces that are far too small currently. Whereas military budget, we think of as weaponry and things like that. We need, in my view, we need to stop thinking about military in terms of weaponry and you know, the killing of other people, and think about it in terms of think of defense in terms of how do we secure the well-being of our citizens, and how do we secure the well-being of citizens around the world.
Yeah, that's such a great comment, because real defense, how are you really defending and protecting everyone? You know, all those little slivers of the pie are ways that we protect. And so, yeah, that's really what is defense. It has a lot more to do with some of those other slivers.
I think if we think of it as opposed to defense as security, you know, if the pandemic showed us anything, biggest military in the world cannot defend us from germs. You know, they know COVID knows no borders. You know, it will travel wherever it wants. So that's just an example of what real security would look like. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you. So let's take a look at Biden's budget. So we have seen from the Biden administration fiscal year 2022 discretionary budget. And what we see in this pie chart again is that we see increases overall, but we see an $11.3 billion increase in the military budget. And one of the bullet points that you see there on the left connects to what Marcia said, that increase alone is bigger than the CDC's entire discretionary budget. And so this idea that certain things we're trying to protect ourselves from cannot be solved with guns, perhaps we need to look now, the second bullet point saying that actually polls again and again show that voters do by and large support shifting money to other needs, and kind of see that protection of ourselves and the world looks at some of those other needs. So this is not an unpopular idea by any means.
So when we look at this graph, we can see where US's military budget is combined with the next 11 countries and then the rest of the world. And the amount that we're spending on our military is obscene. So we are part of CAPA is part of a coalition of many, many organizations that are seeking to get a 10% reduction in the military budget in the next fiscal cycle. 10% is not a big goal, but we're trying to make it at least a realistic goal. I'd like to see it, 40 or 50% decrease, but that isn't going to happen. So, rather than making it a totally unrealistic goal, we'll start with 10 and then another 10 and then another 10. However long it takes, we'll just keep trying to shrink it down. So you can see that, where we're ramping up rhetoric about China and Russia and whatnot, look at how big their budget is compared to ours, if you look at the little color bars there. So it's nuts. So anyway, moving on to the next slide. So the US has a huge number, over 800 military bases around the globe. And if we look at the map, which we have here, you can see where they're beginning to do the pivot to putting more and more bases around China. Lots of bases right on the border with Russia. And then, we wonder why other countries might be worried about our presence. So it's the costs involved in supplying all of these bases around the world, are totally, it's unnecessary. The rest of the world looks at the United States as being the biggest threat to peace. And one can see why by looking at how we're all over the place in terms of intervening with our imperialistic goals around the world. So anyway, so that is what I want to say about that. Anyway.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what you said, Marcia. A lot of military personnel, actually have come out and spoken out to say that, wow, we really should look at closing a lot of these bases. And so there are voices within military personnel who are agreeing with a lot of what we're sharing here, and they're coming out kind of more and more. So on our next slide, we're looking at how much are we ourselves as taxpayers paying into this kind of system. In Illinois, we look at the average taxpayer who is paying over $3,800 into this type of system for military in 2019. And, you know, it's just one of those pause points where you just pause your mind and you think about, okay, you know, all those pie pieces that we're thinking about, maybe I feel I don't have another option, but there are ideas that are coming out of the woodwork, coming out of the grassroots about how to, if I'm not happy with paying $3,800 toward these things, what are some options? And we're going to talk about a couple. And this is a nice tool that we'd like to offer. If anyone would like to see down toward the bottom of the screen, the nationalpriorities.org website, this particular link, which I'll drop in the chat as well, it is going to show, oops, didn't mean to move forward. This particular link is going to show what are some of the trade-offs that, you know, that $3,800 or just that giant sum, if you look at the total, could fund certain other things, whether they are medical, whether they are educational. So, you know, what could that money produce if it did go into some of these other realms? So I will just actually take a moment to drop that link in the chat. Sorry, I'm just gonna pause the screen share for a moment, and place that in there for everyone.
Yeah, if you click on it, like for instance, the military budget this year instead could create 9.99 million clean energy jobs for a year with benefits, you know, or create 217 billion and 95 ventilators. You know, I mean, it's just it's nuts what we could be doing if we weren't spending so much on the military, you know. So we strongly suggest that you check out National Priorities Project. It has wonderful resources wonderful resources to do more research on this topic of defense spending and what we could be spending our money on instead. So, yeah.
Okay. We also wanted to just look at some of the harm that's caused, maybe some things that are very visible and some might be more invisible. And, you know, I think it's really important that these things we point out are not intended to, you know, be basically demonizing anyone or, you know, people who have served in the military. It's more of an invitation to discussion. And so we hear from veterans, Veterans for Peace, one of the great groups that we work with, and we hear the after effects of some of these things. And we're just looking what shifts could we make? We see in Iraq that there are varying estimates, but by some very conservative estimates, 600,000 people killed in the actions in Iraq that the US implemented. And we do see a profit for some companies, for some US-based companies. We see in Yemen, some estimates 100,000 people killed, but we see big profits from some companies. And it's worth asking questions. In Chicago, you know, we have the Boeing headquarters, and it's again, not about demonizing, but about asking what are other uses, and what about the human element? In Afghanistan, 100,000 people killed by some estimates, and how do we move conversations with groups who may have made money in those endeavors? In Guatemala, something that I learned about back when the US had removed a leader of Guatemala, and one of these United States corporations, which actually gained 42% of Guatemala's land, and then that single US company was having revenues twice that of the entire nation of Guatemala. So those are some things that may be seen or unseen here where we live. Other things that we want to point out are on world relations. Even in a poll from this year across 50 nations, 50,000 people were surveyed, and 44% of them said that US influence threatens democracy worldwide. So this is how we are seen around the world in many cases. Some 95% of suicide attacks are actually conducted to resist foreign troops being there. So all those 800 bases of our troops, if we really want to think about, caring for our troops, placing them there is immediately antagonistic in many cases. What about impacts on our culture? This system can really alter our identity and can really disrupt our development towards social and economic justice. And especially for minorities being hugely impacted across the world, but also here. And then impacts on military personnel, again, to bring them into the conversation with us. And maybe even someone on this call may have served in the military, but we are seeing so many deaths by suicide. We are seeing this rising. We also see that sexual assault and denial of promised rewards is another thing that many veterans report. And so even if you say I'm pro-veteran, we want to really think about, is the system as is helping anyone? And it seems like the harm really jumps out. So here's where we get to our action. We're talking about the NDAA, and this is, if you're not familiar with that acronym, it's the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, this is the military budget that is proposed every single year, and it will be debated starting in early June. So just in days, this will start to be debated. Now, we are saying stay tuned because this debate we think is so important, and we hope that more people jump into this debate and have their voices part of this debate, so that it doesn't just, another year goes by and another NDAA. So what are we seeking? As Marcia mentioned earlier, that minimum 10% reduction, which is modest, but is also a major change from what Democrat and Republican administrations have done. Always growing by 10%, or more. And so this would be a 10% reduction.
Yeah. The 10% reduction would put us on par with what Obama's military budget was. So if we were able to get the 10% reduction, it would only take us back to, 4 years ago. That tells you how insane the increases have been. And as a people, as Americans, we have to acknowledge the fact that, as it says on the slide, that our budgets are moral documents. We are saying that the military is more important than healthcare. It's more important than education, or more important than the environment, because that's where we're putting all the money, So it's an education process of making people understand that we have to switch it up here, you know? And so there will be literally hundreds of amendments to the NDAA that will be presented by various members of Congress. Some of it will be wanting to earmark money for their particular special program, you know. One of the things that the defense contractors have done is they have strategically placed factories and, you know, places where they're providing jobs in every state in the union. So they've got a lobby team right there with their Congress people, you know, trying to keep the jobs and the money flowing to their constituents. So it makes it challenging to be able to do this, you know, reduction, because everybody's fighting against everybody else. But that doesn't mean we aren't going to be doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so on that point, another action besides just this huge conversation on the NDAA is CAPA will be doing lobby days and kind of some trainings coming up in June on advocacy, speaking directly to Congress people, and how does that work and how do you do it? So these are some of the trainings that we will be offering. And then as far as jumping into that conversation to Congress people, this is one of those ways that we like to offer.
Yeah. So just, I don't know, by raising of hands or people speaking, because there are only 7 of us, it's certainly, we could do that. How many people have participated in lobby visits with their Congress people? I see.
Steve has?
Carol,
Mhm.
I have.
Okay. How about you, Sam?
have.
Marna has?
Yeah, but not for a while. I'll admit that.
I have not.
Okay.
Sam.
Is it something that you would be interested in learning more about?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So Sam, are you in? No, Steve is in Wisconsin.
Milwaukee. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Sam, where are you located?
I'm in the Chicago area.
Yeah. Do you know? Well, I'm sure you do know which is your congressperson.
Yes, Janet Schakowsky.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Well, obviously, since CAPA is in Evanston, we share the same rep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so we will be doing lobby training, and Peace Action National puts on lobby training days that we'll be participating in, and so there'll be, if you're on CAPA's distribution list, there will be, you know, opportunities to sign up and be part of that, because it's one of the tactics we use in our overarching strategy to affect change, for those of us who've been doing this, I'm sure that we understand that many of the changes we're seeking may never happen in our lifetime, but we have to move it incrementally forward, you know. And so making noise is one of the ways we can do that, and making noise in halls of Congress as well as on the street. Let's open
And
it
I
up.
love what, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I love what Marna also added in the chat. Nonviolent Peace Force has recently hired a representative for DC and working to get $25 million toward unarmed civilian protection efforts. So that's like thinking about a pie piece of 25 million, and that is a piece of pie. And that will do something. So that is so exciting. Thinking about coordinating maybe with CAPA, and so thank you for sharing that as well.
I just want to say we were successful in getting the term unarmed civilian protection in the 2020 appropriations bill, and it directs State Department to put funding towards unarmed approaches to protecting civilians. So we're now trying to actually attach funding to that. So that's really exciting, and starts to, I think, the other hand of what we're doing in terms of defunding, to say there are alternatives that work. Therefore, we can start to defund the militarized approach.
Yeah, that is so huge, because when people hear about taking away from a military approach, there's an understandable fear that there's nothing to replace it with, or that things will become completely chaotic all around the world. So I thank you, Marna, for what you said. It's like offering something that is a constructive.
Yeah.
So I will go back to my screen share. And oops. Oh, this is a billboard that we just wanted to share. This is put out by World Beyond War, and it's such a powerful, one of their powerful billboards. 3% of US military spending could end starvation on Earth. And that sounds very fantastical, but World Beyond War very closely documents this statistic, and uses estimates from the UN and from all these different bodies to say that the estimates for what people believe would provide food for people around the world is about 3% of that big blue pie piece. So it's really documented on this particular part of World Beyond War's website. A great conversation starter.
I was in Milwaukee, by the way.
Oh, that's so fantastic. Thank you, Steve.
We had a couple events there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and World Beyond War has tried to get these kind of billboards just as educational things, and in some locations have been refused the right to put that up, but they're starting to be put up in Germany and in places all over. And then that jobs piece that Marcia mentioned, how a lot of the weapons companies, weapons makers will have a plant in kind of strategically in all 50 states, they'll have a plant providing jobs. However, studies have been done. This was a scholarly study by Brown University. And it basically shows that when you're putting money towards something, war and weapons are not a great job creator. I even remember a CNN episode where Wolf Blitzer was, someone was telling him about the deaths in Yemen, and his response was, yeah, but what about the jobs? The US jobs would be affected if we stop making weapons. But actually, there's a lot of good info that jobs are not the greatest, or I'm sorry, weapons are not the greatest job creator. Putting money into healthcare and education, infrastructure, green energy, these things have been shown by scholarly studies to actually be a bigger job creator. And so that can appeal to anyone who's concerned about, where is my job going to go? And then on this slide, we just wanted to pause. We're almost through our slides, but we wanted to just, again, circle back to spending priorities that you may have, or if you have ideas or tactics that we didn't mention, because we just touched on a couple things that CAPA wants to do. But if there are any other ideas or tactics that you see as important part of this defunding conversation, what would anyone want to toss out there in addition? If you want to unmute.
Yeah, this is Carol again. I've heard that the Pentagon has never been audited, and that thought has stayed with me. And I would think that would appeal to any of these Congress people that are looking at the bottom line, the fact that the Pentagon has never been audited. Is that still a true fact?
They failed an audit last year. I mean, they actually attempted it, and they were unable to do it. You know, they failed in their ability to be able to audit themselves. So yeah, the amount of waste is unknown. You know, the money that we sent to Iraq, they could never find. Lots of it, they were never able to document where it went and what it was used for. You know, we've all heard about the $400, you know, screws or toilets or, you know, whatever.
Coffee mugs. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You know, just, yeah. So
Yeah.
great point, Carol.
It's huge, Carol. And I think more people would, you know, hearing that would really respond to it. People who are maybe fiscally conservative, people who are concerned about budgets would really, you know, you would hope that they would respond to that. So thank you. That is something we definitely should draw into our conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think for, you know, the slide that you showed earlier that showed the average Illinois taxpayer contribution to that military budget, that, you know, for everyone, for every taxpayer, and particularly those that are fiscally conservative, you would think that it would not be difficult to draw that line between what they're paying in their taxes and not being able to actually attribute that to, you know, where that money is actually going, because the Pentagon cannot pass an audit. So I think that, you know, that should resonate with all citizens, just the ability to, at a minimum, audit and understand where the funding is going. That should be something everyone could get on board with.
Okay, Steve, you had a thought?
Yeah, some of the same people that had rallies in front of that big billboard, that is the End the Wars Coalition in Milwaukee. We've taken up the 10% cut notion and tried really hard to convince our representative, Gwen Moore, to go along with that, asking for an ironclad pledge that she would not vote for any budget that wasn't a 10% cut from Trump's budget, not even just from Biden's, but from Trump's, that is the current budget. And she wouldn't make that pledge. And I'm wondering if anybody in Illinois, any Congress people there, have made that pledge. The problem is that sometimes military budgets get wrapped up with other things and omnibus bills.
Mhm.
We're asking to vote against these bills that would have some good things for, well, healthcare, for example. And so it would mean gumming up the works to vote against it. On the other hand, our thought is even just a few Democrats are voting against those sort of things, that there would have to be some negotiation and maybe that 10% cut. We've also related to the national discussions that Code Pink has put together. I don't know if CAPA has been involved in those much, but and especially orienting toward the Mark Pocan and Barbara Lee Defense Spending Cuts Caucus.
Mhm.
We're not sure what their strategy is. If you have determined it, I would be interested to hear that, because we'd like to give some oomph to it.
Yeah, well, your Mark Pocan, you know, and Barbara Lee are the two heads of that campaign, or subcommittee, so to speak.
Caucus.
Yeah, and we haven't heard yet. We're keeping our ear to the ground on that, but we haven't heard any specific plans from them yet. But we work with Hassan El-Tayeb at FCNL pretty closely. He used to actually work for CAPA. So we have an in there in terms of what's going on the Hill. We'll be watching it too, and we'd love to work with you guys collaboratively on any plans that are coming down the pike.
And as far as getting everybody from Illinois to make that solid pledge?
We did last year. I think Jan actually did sign on to that. But we'll be in our lobby visits that will be coming up. We'll be doing the training in June, and then the visits will probably happen at the end of June, beginning of July. And I know that cutting the defense budget will be a heavy hit in terms of our lobby work.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Marcia, there are already a couple Congress people in Illinois who we think already are agreeing to this, but I forget the names and numbers. But yeah, that'll be a big focus for those lobby visits too.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be helpful to know because nobody wants to be hanging out there by themselves, including our
Exactly.
one more. So
Right.
if there were a few more, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll communicate with you on that, Steve. Definitely. Okay, I will just share the last two slides and jump in anyone else if you'd have any other thoughts to add. We wanted to just here show that if you're ever interested in joining some of our meetings, anyone is welcome. And yeah, Marcia, did you want to mention, because I know you knew about that, the next meeting of the foreign policy work?
We generally are always on the last Tuesday of the month. But because of all the planning we've been doing for this and that this summit, and that there are 5 Tuesdays in June, we're going to do our May meeting on June 1st, and then do the June meeting at the last Tuesday of the month, as it normally would be. So that's for the larger foreign policy working group. And then within the foreign policy working group, as it says on the slide, we have 4 sub-campaigns. One is on nuclear disarmament, which is what CAPA started as in the same freeze movement 40 years ago, 42 years ago, whatever it was. Then we have a Palestine human and civil rights campaign. This is Charles and I are both on the Defund the Pentagon, and then a no new Cold War. To try to get the rhetoric tamped down to demonize China and Russia, So yeah, if you are interested, we can, put you on the distribution list for the Foreign Policy Working Group. If anybody's interested in learning more about what it is we're up to, if you drop us a line or put something in the chat, we'll be happy to keep you up to date on what we're working on. And thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. And each of these subgroups also, I would just add, has regular meetings by Zoom. So, if you're ever interested, we would be able to provide the Zoom links for those meetings. But with that, I know we're out of time, but we just wanted to end with a quote from Malala Yousafzai, and how she said, if you want to end war, then instead of sending guns, send books. Instead of sending tanks, send pens. Instead of sending soldiers, send teachers. And, she speaks from experience, as someone who had experienced war and even being shot. So this is a great perspective, I think, to bring. And so, thank you so much, everybody. Really grateful to you. And I think with that, we are, Lauren, are we now going to transition back to the main room?
Yes, we are.